Hey guys, doing something a little different today. It's picture to picture with video games. Hooray! And you'll notice, no, I am not playing the game right now. I played the game in the past, and now I'm talking to you in the present. It's like time travel. Fancy. Why did I whisper that? Time travel. Anyway, that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about Bell Let's Talk and the video game Subject 13 because it ties in for me. Now, first of all, what is Bell Let's Talk? Bell Let's Talk is January 25th in Canada. When you talk, text, and do social medias, Bell donates 5 cents for each engagement, I guess, to mental health initiatives. I don't know how they know how you're talking about mental health, but I don't want to think about that. Maybe it's just each call is just getting people to use Bell Network services. And I am a Bell customer, so yay, there you have it. And some people will say it's a corporate shill and this is just advertising and it's, exploiting mental illness and all that stuff. And my attitude is if a company is going to do something good, I don't care if there's an element of, yes, it's getting something out of the deal. I really don't care about that. I care more that it's trying to do something good. And if there's a side of self-interest in it, I am good with that because it's still doing a good thing. And I think that I wish more companies did things like this because if they put their corporate muscle behind these initiatives in real terms instead of just putting a nice little face on it, then the world would be better off and there would be less stigma surrounding these issues. And I don't feel this way about every issue. I don't feel that necessarily, raising awareness is the goal because historically what they found about mental illness as well, awareness was raised of it, so was the stigma. And we don't want that. We want to reduce stigma. So stigma reduction is a slightly different thing. Actually, it's a very different thing than raising awareness. You guys all know how I feel about raising awareness, to raise more awareness. I talked about that yesterday. But today, I picked the game Subject 13 because this gentleman, the protagonist, you notice he's definitely an everyman. He's not a muscle-bound dude. He's a regular dude. But he starts the game having attempted suicide. And I thought this was a really cool use of that, white, straight, cisgendered male protagonist because he's got a PhD and years of research and everything like that. So it's plausible that he might actually be over the age of 40, and white men over the age of 40 are the group most likely to die by suicide. So I think this is an appropriate protagonist for this game. And people fight about these statistics all the time. They fight about the fact, well, women are more likely to attempt suicide, but men are more likely to die by it and all this stuff. Why are we fighting about statistics like this? We clearly have work to do on both sides. I just think the challenges for men and women, generally speaking, are somewhat different, and it's important to sort of take the time to address those specific challenges because I think women, at least in my experience, and this is obviously not true across the board, I notice when I'm in rooms of women, there's a lot of talking, but a lot of the talk is not meaningful. Now, guys talk around feelings. And I've noticed that for the most part, I'm more like this. I am very complicated. I'm very comfortable talking about issues. But obviously, I come at issues from my own perspective. So that is talking about my feelings without talking about my feelings. It's my opinion, which is much safer and less vulnerable, right? But when it comes down to it, that's because it's the internet. And in my own life, there's a place to validate sounds so cheesy, but there's a place to recognize your feelings are valid. Feelings are not something that you can completely stomp out because they're inconvenient. Everybody has feelings. And you become much more you master your emotions. I won't say control because emotions are inherently, we know scientifically that you feel faster than you think. And so all you're thinking is just a rationalization after the fact for that feeling you had. And so feelings come first, and those are important, because if you don't want to be controlled to an unhealthy extent by your feelings, you have to acknowledge them, validate them, and understand them. And it's very hard to understand your feelings when you can't acknowledge they're there. And this is a huge issue in a lot of workplaces, where it used to be everybody's just grumble, grumble, grumble at work. I'm a Gen Xer. We grumble at work. Keep your head down. Whereas millennials have this, hi, how are you? I'm super Greg. How are you? I'm great, Janelle. Thanks for asking. And if you get like 5 people in a room, statistically, one of those people is bullshitting everybody else. They're going through a bad time. The number of people in these happy Silicon Valley tech startups where everybody talks like everything's great, like there's some sort of freaking hippie Christmas elf with pecs and yoga, they're hiding something. And this is not healthy. And yes, there is something to this idea that if you practice smiling, it's a mood booster and everything like that. But this goes beyond that. This is everybody's walking on thin ice. And so nobody wants to be the first person that goes, I am not okay with this, because what happens then is that person gets identified as a problem. Expressing concerns is something that healthy workplaces should have the space for, and healthy friendships should have the space for, and healthy intimate relationships should have the space for, and a lot of them don't. And I say this because when I was struggling really hard, I've talked about my experiences with PTSD before, but one of the things I had to do, and it was one of the more difficult things I've had to do in my life where I actually had a choice, as opposed to just surviving a bad circumstance, like put your head down and get through it. It was a very difficult thing to do, but I knew it was my decision, and that was start making changes in my life and how I lived my life and how I associate with other people and how I related to my own limits and boundaries. Because I'm one of those people, grew up, you may notice I really like superheroes. You'll see Super Grover. But one of the things you have to watch with that is this idea of a boundary, a limitation is something to be broken. And it's more like a limitation is something to understand. So you don't, I describe it to myself as, there's a hole in the ground. You can build a bridge over the hole. You can go around the hole. You can jump over the hole. But if you don't know the hole's there, you're like the first time you play Mario and you run and go because you don't know you're supposed to jump. So you have to identify the thin ice. You have to identify the pitfalls that you might encounter. And then you have to question yourself, is it really worth going over this thing instead of around it or finding another path? And it happened that it was this pruning away of my immediate social circle who weren't good for me. And it wasn't that I said to people, I don't want to talk to you anymore. It was, look, this is how I have to do things from now on. I got myself into a really bad place with some of the choices I made and the lack of boundaries I had. And it's amazing how many people just drop you and they make up some nonsense reason, aka excuse, for why they do that. But it's really that people who are running from their own stuff have a really hard time facing people who are facing their stuff. And it was very hard temporarily, but I'm better off. Don't underestimate the impact that people around you in your environment have on whatever challenges you're going through. So that's my little let's talk thing. Now talk about the game. Subject 13, it's a puzzle game, puzzle adventure game. It's a definite homage to games like Myst with a side of something like Portal. It's doesn't have any action component. You can't die. You can't get stuck and have to start over. It's nicely compartmentalized that way that it will not let you move on without everything you need to complete the next puzzle. And that's a cool thing, because what I like about that, it's like, no, you can do this if you stick with it far enough, with one notable exception that I will get to in a bit. Most of the puzzle designs are amazing. There's an element of challenge. It's one of those things where everything is really intuitive except for one thing, and it's like, oh, duh. And after you do it, it's like, right, that makes sense that I would have to do it. But until you sort of figure out that one little thing, inspect every item, play with things in the inspect screen. Consoles are still not the best environment for this stuff. I wish that we could develop some sort of alternate controller that is just like my sort of wireless keyboard and mouse. You don't even need the keyboard. You just need basically a mouse with a mouse pad, and this is nicely magnetized and stuff. So people could just have the one-to-one control schematic that, because man, learning how to turn cranks and things like that, it took me a while, and I'm still not great at it, and I finished the game. But there's a lot of really neat puzzles. I love numeric puzzles. I love slider puzzles. I love little things that you can just turn out the world and fart around with until you get it. I love that stuff. It is catnip for me. And this game has that in spades. The story is actually pretty good. It's one of those simple but told in flashback, like BioShock is probably the one you guys are most familiar with, but Myst had an element of it too. You find diary entries, you find pages, and you learn who the players are, and it slowly unfolds, and I really enjoyed it. It was a nice story about a guy who needs rescuing. And you're like, what? Yes, you know, call him a manzel in distress if you want. This is about needing help. And it's subtle in its own way right until the end. And then some people might accuse it of being sort of identity politics or overly political. I don't think so. I thought it was a really great metaphor for guys, especially guys, because it's harder for men a lot of times, but getting into situations where they need to ask for help, and that not being shameful, that actually being a very good and positive and great thing. And so I really liked that element of it. Now, what didn't I like? I think it has aspects to do with the port and with the fact that graphics resolution is never going to be as good as a console as it is on PC. Viewing distance is more of an issue when you're playing on a television than you're playing on a computer monitor, where you can like sit right up here if you need to. But there was one particular puzzle right at the end, and it's this multi-stage one. Remember the marble puzzle in Riven? It reminded me a lot of that, because it's multiple steps, and if it's not all right, there's no hint as to where you've gone wrong. But I couldn't read the glyphs that were substituted for numbers. I couldn't distinguish between straight lines, because they were kind of wiggly, like they'd been carved into an object, and the dots, which were smearing together. So people who have low vision, or even somebody like me who constantly battles eye strain, either be prepared to look up that solution like I did, because my eyes were burning, straining, trying to see, is that 3 dashes, or is that 2 dashes and 4 dots? I can't tell. It'll look the same to me. And then some of the things as well, because they're those locked off scenes, and you know, it's the perspective angle. Sometimes it's a little hard to see. It's a little hard to kind of navigate. Point and click that would pathfind it for you feels like it's a more natural setting for this game. Now, some people don't have gaming PCs can run it, so it's great that this is on console, because like I said, there's a lot of awesome to it. There's some QA stuff that probably should have been worked out more. The game crashed twice on me, and it's not very long. You don't lose anything, it's just annoying. And some of the like grammar, some of the text, there's some typos and everything like that by the time it's a port, I know it's a Kickstarter back kind of indie game built in Unity, but that stuff, the minute you're on a platform like the PS4, there's a certain expectation that stuff gets corrected during the feedback process of your PC phase of the game. But that being said, there are some really great puzzles, and it's really enjoyable, and I ended up really liking the main character. And the various sort of there's this rise of the scientist as protagonist now that I really like, because they're not shying away from, the fact that us nerds are not the most immediately likable people. But as you get to know us, you recognize that we have the same feelings as everybody else, and we actually feel them quite powerfully and quite acutely. And the puzzles were fun. I love those multi-layered ones where it can be super stupid. Like, there's one that is just, yes, this is what I expect from an adventure game. You have to really pay attention to the descriptions sometimes with what they say, because otherwise, the thing I had to set on fire, I wouldn't have assumed I had to set it on fire. There is one part that if you haven't gone to a summer camp where you make the floating compass, I don't know if you guys have done that. I did that, so I'm like, oh yeah, I know what to do here. The game just tells you need a compass, and then you have all this stuff in your inventory, and if you kind of know what you're going for, then it's not bad. But if I didn't have that background, I struggled with it, this one part. And again, it's just try to combine items if you're in your inventory. If you're stuck, it's usually something you have to manipulate on an item, or you have to combine items or something like that. Your socket wrench is very much a go-to if in doubt, and some items can be used multiple ways, but you have to change the state of that item to use it that way. And there's a hint system, but it doesn't always help that way. And I get it, these games are intended for you to get stuck and go away and go, you frustrate me, game. And you go back to it, and then, like, I'm like that with puzzle games. Something will be completely confounding me. I'll walk away from it, sleep on it, sometimes come back and go, duh, it's just fresh eyes. I'm telling you this because, like I said, I did enjoy the game. I just want people to go into it, have a good experience, instead of going, that puzzle was so annoying, why did you recommend this game? I am recommending this game despite some annoyances, because I found it interesting and I did find it fun. It was a nice way to spend a weekend, and it's short enough that, yeah, you can blow through it in a weekend. Or, if you want to, not look anything up and fight with it, you can do that too. But it's something that I thought was a meaningful experience for the story alone, just because I think it's an experience we don't talk about enough, and we don't allow guys permission to indulge in fantasies that involve them having to be rescued. And so I think that, and yes, there's a certain amount of, you have to escape from this area, but it doesn't end there. Yes, there's a certain amount of intuition, but it still is a locked room. And if that character had been a woman, it would have been a princess in a tower scenario. And so I think it's very good that this developer went there. And that may not have been intentional. That's just what I took from it. Having played, a bunch of games that are supposed to be like empowering for women. It's all about, it's the damsel in distress who saves herself. Well, if you save yourself, you're not by definition a damsel in distress. It's not part of the role. Then you are just the heroine of a story who the story is about, right? And so these terms get misused, and there's been such a terror in the video game industry in exploring stories about people who do need to ask for help, who do need something beyond their own skills, their own agency to get out of a bad spot. And so I think that I'd like to see more games with that element in it. It's a legitimate expression of a hidden desire that maybe more guys have than I gave them credit for. Maybe this is something that is just unspoken because guys aren't supposed to want to be rescued. They're supposed to want to be the rescuer in the same way that women are supposed to want to be the princess, right? So I don't know, but that's what I took from the game. And hope you like this preview. And please talk, share your stories, reach out and support other people. If there's somebody you haven't talked to in a while, now's a really good day to do it. I'm going to try to do that myself if time permits. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Caring and kindness really does mean so much. It costs you very little to be kind, but the cost to another person if you decide to be mean when they're struggling can be immeasurable. So, if you care about resource allocation, and I love resource management in video games, kindness is a resource. And it's a resource like gold in a video game or currency that only has value if you use it. So that's my message. Feel better, everyone, or continue being happy, but really happy, not happy like awesome, oh my god, I'm so fake, right? Not that kind of happy. Legitimate happy, like this freaking rabbit here, or the Moogle, or Batmite. This is just my little thing of happy. It's like, I like to make things look like the inside of my brain. So that's sort of the explanation of this sort of thing. These are just things I like, including the Daggett from classic Battlestar Galactica. Muffet is awesome. And I know you could never do it today because there's a monkey in a suit. But I loved Muffet the Daggett when I first saw Battlestar Galactica. Here he is. And I still think he's a cool little relic of 70s sci-fi. And I'm allowed to think that. Because what kid doesn't want like a dog bear robot when they're growing up? That's up there with, like Battle Cat from He-Man. What kid doesn't want a giant talking cat that you can ride? That's like the best as far as I was concerned as a kid, But yeah, this is just things that make me happy. And a freaking ugly wolf with wolves on the side that apparently my husband put here to punk me. I just discovered this. What is this? Why is this here? Why did this violate my sacred happy space? Look at that. It's a wolf with wolves on its side. That is some freaky crap. It's like Mount Wolfmore on the side of a wolf. Like, this is not supposed to be here.